Okay, today we are going to be making some fingerless gloves. This is quite a simple, straightforward project. We are going to be using wool. These are quite lacy looking ones, so I'm using a standard DK. You can go up to chunky, or if you want them to look even lacier, you can drop down to sort of a 3-ply. We also need scissors, a pen and paper or a stitch counter just to keep track of what we're doing. Darning needle, knitting hook, and a 24 peg knitting loom. This is the smallest of the size in your standard loom set. We're going to be knitting in the flat rather than in the round for this project. Now, the gloves that we're going to make they do fit me. I've got quite slim hands, but they will fit more sort of ladies and sort of teenagers. If you want to take these up a size, just jump up to the next size up loom and just literally add a couple of stitches all the way through on the widths. You can use your own judgment on that. What I would do is I would look at the size this pair come out, and for each sort of peg you will add about 1 centimetre onto the final width. So, you know, each peg from each side. So if you go up to the next size up loom and instead of using 24 pegs, you use 26, that will probably add about 1 centimetre onto the total circumference. So use your best judgment. There is quite a bit of stretch in these, so you don't have to be too exact with it. Okay, in order to start this project, as I said, we're going to be working in the flat. Leave yourself a good length because we can use that in the making up project. When we get to that point, you're going to start by tying a little slip knot as always and popping that over the little holding peg there. Now, I'm going to use this as peg number 1, so not the one directly, but we're going to use this as peg number 1. Now, we're not using all the pegs to start, so I want you to count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that is going to be our first peg. So let me just tuck that in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's our first one. Now we're going to leave a total of 8 pegs empty. So let me just wrap these. Just going to start doing a little E-wrap all the way around. Da-da-da. Ah. I've got, how many have I got empty there? 1, 2, 3. Oh. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I've wrapped one too many, so I'm going to flick that one off. Okay, so there we have our initial sort of wrap. So I'm just going to tie that on there and then show you again. So we've got, this is the first peg, so empty, 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 wrapped all the way around, and then on the end we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 left. Okay, so that is how we initially start this. And then just go back to the beginning with this. What we're going to do is we're going to do a rib stitch, and we're going to do a rib stitch for 5 rows. So I'm just going to space these down a bit. What we're going to do in order to achieve this is we already have an E-wrap on there, so I'm going to take that as my first one. Whenever we're knitting in the flat, we tend not to work the stitch we've just come off, so we're just going to leave that loosely wrapped around it there. And with this one, we're going to go down, through, pull it up, then it comes over the top and goes back on the peg like that. And then we go in one E-wrap and one we pull down and across, so we've got that diagonal, and then we come up, and then with this one we go down and through, pull it up, and then it flicks up and over like that. And we're going to keep doing this to the end of the row. So, well, we're going to do this for 5 rows, in fact. Now, what is important with this is that if you're doing the normal stitch on a row as opposed to the up and over, that stitch on the way back on the second row matches up with the one before it, so you can't swap them. So if you've done a normal A-wrap on a peg with a rib stitch, that peg always has to be a normal A-stitch. So up and over. Oh. Take a look at that. Move my ball of wool out the way because I can knock the camera. Oh. Just gonna rearrange this. I'm just gonna do to the end of this row so you can see what I mean. That goes on, up and over. And down. And around and down. Now, we finished that row, and because this is the last peg we've done, we don't obviously, we're going to use it as a turning peg, so we don't put another stitch on it now. But because this was an E-wrapped peg, not an up and over peg the last time, we have to stick to that. So again, we make sure that that peg is also up and over. Yeah, otherwise what happens is your ribs don't stay nice and straight. You don't get nice straight ribs, you get a weird mottled effect. So I'm going to leave you to keep going with this, and once you've done a total of 5 rows in this rib stitch, then come back and we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so we've now done our 5 rows of rib stitch, so this is what you've got on your loom. Now we're going to switch to a stitch I've done once before on a video, and I'm not sure the proper name. S-stitches, brick stitches. I tend to call them brick stitches because I think they look like little bricks in a wall, but we're going to go through one by one. I think it's commonly called an S-stitch a lot of the time. So what we do is, from the end of this, we start looking at the gaps rather than the pegs. So we're going to look at our first gap, and we're going to come through. We're going to wrap around one and then back onto the last one, and then you knit these off. Okay, yep, go, and then the same again, we come across, there we go, and just keep going along like that. So you go through the gap, across, around the back, and back over. Okay, now we're going to keep doing this all the way along. I'm going to finish this row because obviously I know at the end of when we're knitting in the flat, at the end of a lot of the rows you just ignore the last one we did, but because of the way this stitch works, you have to approach it a little differently. So let me just get to the end here and I'll show you how we do that. And we're going to do this stitch for a total of 5 rows again. Oh, I did that wrong. Went through the wrong gap. Oh. Okay, so that is almost there. There we go. So that is a total of 1 row. Now, to start our second row and to continue going with that, once we're here, you'll see it's like the wool comes off the second to last peg. It's like it comes off of this one. So all we do, because we're now going this way, is this has to be the first peg we wrap. So all we do is we come all the way around, wrap it, and back there. Okay, I'll show you that again. So we come off of it, we come all the way around and back there. And then you just continue on as normal, but in the other direction. So through the gap, around and back. And just keep going. Obviously this is the second row. What I want you to do is a total of 5 rows in this stitch. And then I will meet you back here. Okay, so I have done the 5 rows in that stitch. Now, what I'm going to do is another 8. However, this is slightly different because what we're going to do, I'm just going to start knitting as I explain this. I've lost my hook. Ah, there it is. Okay. We're just going to continue as normal. So we've done 5. This is technically the 6th. However, it is the first one of our, what I'm going to call increase rows, where we're going to add an extra stitch on every row, and we're going to do 8 of them, which means by the time we finish doing those 8, every single peg on the loom will be being used and have a stitch on. So as much as I recommend keeping track of your rows and how many you've done, you can actually see when you've got there with this one, because all of the pegs have stitches on, so you can actually see it. I'm just going to show you how we're going to do the increase when we get to the end of this row. Okay. Now normally that would be the end of our row and we'd start going back. However, as I said, this is the first of our increase rows. So what we do here is we come onto another peg, we come around and on, and then we knit that one. And that is technically the end of that row. So you mark that down as a row with an increase. Now to go back, you treat this like a normal stitch. So on the way back, we do like we normally do, where we come around and go back. And then when we get to the end of this row, we'll add one on there as well. So you need to do a total of 8 of those. And by the time you've done those 8, every single peg on the loom will have a stitch on it. So I'll let you go and do that. And then I'll come back when we're at that stage. Okay, So we've now done those 8 rows, and as you can see, we've increased it out so every single peg has a stitch on it. Now, next step's fairly simple. All we're going to do is we're going to continue to knit round in the flat for another 3 rows. So if you go off and you just, same stitch, if you guys go off and just knit another 3 rows, and I will meet you back here when we're at that stage. Okay, so we've now done those additional 3. So this is kind of what you're left with at this point. There we go. Now, this is possibly the trickiest bit. But again, it's not too bad. What we're going to do is, first of all, we have our stitch here on this one, and we just need to get it across to here. So we're just going to do a basic E-wrap to take that over. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we need to take 5 stitches off. So, can we see that? We're going to readjust the camera slightly, just so you've got a better angle on this. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take that one off. We're going to get with thread. We're going to kind of wrap it around our hook, and we're going to pull this up and over there. Okay. Then we're going to go to the next stitch. We're going to hook that off. I'm going to pull this up and over, and then again we're going to wrap this round, pull this along, up and over, and we're going to go to our next stitch, and this is going to go up and over, and then again I'm going to wrap that round, pull it through, 1 2 3 4, and to the next one, along and over, wrap this round, along and over. I've got 4, so we need to take 5 off, so we're going to take this one, pull it up and over. Now what we're going to do here is, as you can see, we've got 1 2 3 4 5 missing, is we're just going to take this one off, which is number 6, pull it up and over, and then pop the other one, yeah, so pull it up and over, so we've just got one left, and then pop that one on there. So we have 1 2 3 4 5 empty pegs. Then what we're going to do is we're going to continue in the same stitch, the S-wrap stitch or the brick stitch, to knit the rest of this row as normal. So we're going to come through, wrap it around and over, and there we go. And we're just going to keep knitting along the row as we normally would all the way to the very end. Okay, and then jump back on. Okay, so now we've got the 5 missing off that side, or we've took 5 off that side, we've knitted all the way back around to here, and now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take 5 off this side. So again, we need to get to the end peg, so we're just going to do a very quick E-wrap. There we go. And then in exactly the same way, this way is for some reason just a little bit trickier, and I think it is purely because you're kind of working the other way around, if that makes sense. Almost feels like you're doing it left-handed. That's 2. 3. 4. Oh, nearly lost the stitch. Let's see, I've got, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is number 5 coming off. I'm just going to double check. I've got a total of 10 empty pegs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, okay, cool. So with this one, I'm just going to do the same as we did on the other side. And take number 6 off, swap it over, pop that one on. Okay, and then exactly the same as the last time, all we're going to do is to continue knitting in pretty much exactly the same way by coming through the gap, around and over. This does feel like I'm doing it backwards. Oh well. And again, just continue to knit round until you get to the end of the stitches that you have left on. And then I will come back to you at that point. Okay, now we've done that, you have what looks like this, where you have 10 empty pegs and 14, yes, pegs still on. Now all I want you to do is knit in the plain backwards and forwards for another 5 rows, but we're going to switch back to rib stitch. Now remembering what I said before about how important it is to make sure you knit the same type of stitch on each one. So we have to remember that if it's an E-wrap peg, it is an E-wrap peg on every row. If it is an up and over peg, it is an up and over peg on every row. So be careful of that one. Same as we did when we first started the project, yeah. But yeah, you want to go back and forward until you've done a total of 5 rows and then come back to me. Okay, so we've done our 5 rows of rib stitch and this is the stage we're now at. Now what we need to do is take it off of the loom. So we're going to do that in the same way that we decreased. I'm going to take one of these off. We're going to wrap it round, pull that up and over, and then we're going to take the next stitch off. We're going to pull that up and over, and then we're going to wrap around. That's going to come up and over, and basically you're going to continue in this pattern until you get to the very end and you have all of the stitches off of the loom. And when you get to the very last stitch, obviously you can just tie a small knot in the end of it and secure the wool, and then your piece will be totally off the loom. So I'm going to let you guys go and do that while I finish taking this off, and then I will meet you back here. Okay, so we've got it off the loom and tied it off, and as you can see we have one very flat glove. Now all we're going to do is fold this over, and I know this looks really thin and you're like, how on earth is that arm going to fit in there? But believe me, it's quite elastic fabric, it will work. What you do want to make sure you're doing is stitching right along the seam, and the part we're going to stitch is we're going to use the top thread. We're going to stitch along here and stop at that corner, so just here to here, and on the bottom we're going to stitch from here up the side to here, so this bit remains unstitched. Okay, and as I said, what you want to make sure you're doing when you're stitching is that you are literally, I'm just going to pull this slip knot out, that you are literally catching the edges. So it is literally you hold these together and you are looking for the very, very outside loops. Yeah. And so you are literally just catching those and pulling them together. It doesn't have to be any particularly fancy stitch, as long as it's well done. Yeah. And the other thing is, don't pull it too tight or you will get gathering. So make sure it stays fairly loose. So you want to stitch up here to there, and you'll switch from the top down and around to there. Once you've done that, we will come back. Okay, so we've now stitched those edges, and the last thing to do is to turn this the right way through. And then, now I know you're still looking at it thinking, Lily, it's not going to fit, but honestly, this thing is very stretchy. And as you can see, I've still got a good bit of room in there. I know I said I've got skinny little fingers, but still, even for me, there's a good bit of room in there. And there we have a nice long glove. And then all you need to do is make one exactly the same. To go on the other hand. And you have a funky pair of lovely warm fingerless gloves. And they're quite long too, as you can see. So they keep your wrists nice and warm. And I say, for all they look really skinny, there is a good bit of room in them. So there you go, fingerless gloves, really easily.